In the little book, Ministry of Healing, page 127, Ellen White says, pure air, sunshine, abstemishness or temperance, rest, exercise, proper diet, use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. So let's look at those true remedies. And the first one we're going to have a look at is pure air. Notice it's not just air, it's pure air. And here at Living Springs, I think you'll agree that we specialise in pure air, the best of air. There are so many beautiful evergreen trees around there, and I think you realise those evergreen trees are giving off oxygen, and that's what oxygen contains for it to be so essential for our life, is oxygen. Where the part of our body, it's actually every part of our body, requires oxygen. So the number one vital element needed for life is oxygen. And that's not a surprise, is it? You can go 3 minutes without oxygen. Go outside and find a tree. Remember what the trees are giving off? Life-giving oxygen. Breathe deeply from your abdominal muscle, and that blast of oxygen, remember what the oxygen does at the cellular level? Oxygen will give you 18 times more energy. We've looked at the inside of the workings of the cell a few times, and the way I explain it, it looks like there's one energy cycle per cell, but it is not true. So what I've drawn for you here is a whole lot of little energy cycles. In fact, in the muscle cell, you can have 100 energy cycles to a muscle cell. I can hardly get my mind around that. And that's why the saying that you will receive more energy than you expend on your morning walk, because each one of those little energy cycles will give 18 times more energy if enough oxygen is going into your body. So when we breathe in, there are little tiny alveoli. They're like little sacs at the end of each bronchiole in our lungs. And over, I'll magnify it for you, over that little alveoli is a network of capillaries. They're your blood capillaries. So when we breathe in, the oxygen's coming in here, the oxygen goes into the little alveoli, the blood drops the carbon dioxide and picks up the oxygen. It's quite a fascinating process. So then we breathe out the carbon dioxide. So that's where it all happens, is right down there. So how many of these do we have? We've got about 300 million alveoli in our lungs, and that's where the gaseous exchange takes place. First of all, make a list of all the things that oxygen does. So what's the effect of oxygen on the body? It invigorates. I don't know whether you've heard of Wim Hof. Wim Hof is a man, yeah, there's a few nods. He uses breathing to control basically temperature, many things that's happening in his body. And he climbs Himalayan mountains in the snow in shorts and t-shirt. And he's got this method of breathing. It's breathing. And taking in more oxygen invigorates you, yes. It also, to the point where it can electrify the cells. That's how you're going to feel when every cell has enough oxygen to be able to give that sort of energy. It also soothes the nerves. We had a girl do one of our programs, and she was about 35, and on her wrist she'd tattooed "Just Breathe." Now, I'm not suggesting we tattoo "Just Breathe," I'm giving it as an illustration. She said that she learnt the Wim Hof method of breathing, which is breathing very quickly and very deeply and letting out, and she conquered her panic attacks. So whenever she'd feel a bit panicky, she'd do the deep breathing. And she said she even got off all her medication. Now, how simple is that? That's a very simple thing to do. You know, it's a great thing to teach children, because this is a skill that they can take through their whole life. how to manage those irritations that come to us every day. Is that right? So whenever you're feeling irritated, breathe. Breathe. It's oxygen, because we've got 1 trillion brain cells. And when those brain cells have enough oxygen, what's it going to do? Sorry, I forgot a very important letter there. It soothes nerves. All the nerves. But let's have a look at the effect of no oxygen. It's called hypoxia. Hypoxia is a medical condition. It's actually a dangerous condition. It's lack of oxygen at the cellular level. And it can get to the point of death. But there are many people who are suffering from hypoxia, but they're not to the blue lip stage. They're not on death's door. These are some of the symptoms. Fatigue. Feel like they've climbed a mountain and all they've done is got out of bed. Lethargy, can't even get out of bed. Nausea. The little cells that make up the stomach don't have enough oxygen, and when they don't have enough oxygen, they're not producing enough enzymes to break down your food. Headache. The brain cells don't have enough oxygen. I meet many people today that are drifting in that haze that lies between optimum health and severe illness. Do you find that? They're not jumping out of their skin with energy. They're not bedridden. They're just, And if you say, how are you? What's the answer? Oh, not too bad. What's not too bad? Not too good. How many people, when you meet them and you say, how are you, say, fantastic. You'd go, what are they on? What are they on? Don't you think that's sad that we've come to a time on planet Earth when the only people jumping out of their skin are the people on something? And when the people that are on something, when that eases off or wears off, where are they now? I believe that God meant us human beings to feel good every day, every moment. Is that right? Absolute. Life should be very good. And if it's not very good, we've got to put our detective hat on and find out, why isn't life very good? Is it because we are lacking oxygen? Now I want to show you 2 types of air that greatly influence the uptake of oxygen in our body. One type of air is alive with negative ions. Negative ions are electrically charged oxygen molecules. Where do you find them? Well, let me show you how they're made. Water droplets pass through the air, casting off negative ions. I memorised that. I like to get it straight from the horse's mouth. So let's have a look. 3 things have to be present. Water droplets pass through the air. Pass, there's movement, casting off negative ions. So we've got to have movement, moisture and air. Whenever you've got movement, moisture and air, you've got the production of negative ions. If you've got a lot of moisture but not a lot of movement or air, what have you got growing there now? Mould, that's right. So moisture, movement and air. Where do we find moisture, movement and air? The thunderstorm. And I think we can all identify with the smell of the air when the thunderstorm hits. It's lovely, isn't it? I sometimes get that smell when I'm watering my garden. Because when I'm watering my garden, what have I got? Moisture, movement and air. Also the ocean waves. The ocean waves pounding against the rocks is creating those negative ions. Also the waterfalls. All forests are higher in negative ions than when there's no forest. Because remember what those leaves are doing, they're giving off oxygen. But there is a type of tree that gives off more, and that's the pine. Because the pine needles are so numerous. So with pine needles, you get a huge surface area, giving off moisture, giving off oxygen, and you only have to get the slightest breath of wind and you get those needles moving. Just not far from the front of my house, I have some big pine trees, and I love the sound of the wind in the pine trees. Almost sounds like rushing water. And when my little grandchildren are with me, I say, listen to the wind in the pine trees. On the other hand, we've got positive ions. We're referring to the negative charge and the positive charge here. Remember that positive ions are positively bad for you because positive ions have more carbon dioxide in their molecule than oxygen. Where do you find them? Before the thunderstorm. Don't we often comment, I think a storm's coming, the air's heavy with positive ions? The city. So we've got a few things happening in the city that's contributing to the positive ions. One is we've got a lot of people. There's not a lot of forest in the city, is there? We've got a lot of people and they're all giving out carbon dioxide, but some of those people are breathing out carbon monoxide because they are smoking. Carbon monoxide is found in, is given off from cigarette smoke. So the person smoking it and also the passive smokers are getting that carbon monoxide. You'll also find cars giving off carbon monoxide. And because of the high buildings and not a lot of sun getting right down in there, you've also got mould growth, especially where there's rubbish build up in those back streets. I know at the moment that there's been quite a few deaths in India from COVID. You've probably seen that. But have you ever been to India? The filth. There's just filth everywhere. So you've got a lot of mould. You haven't got a lot of pure air. And I was talking to one lady that works with them. She said, oh, they're terrible for drinking water. It's actually been a disaster waiting to happen. And if it wasn't COVID, it would have been something else. Let's have a look at carbon monoxide. Because carbon monoxide is the enemy of oxygen, and I'll show you why. So carbon monoxide, when it's breathed in, it forms a very tight union on the blood cell. But when oxygen's breathed in, it forms a very unstable union, very loose. And the reason for that is when that blood cell is going through our body, it can drop the oxygen quickly wherever it is needed. So if someone's breathing in carbon monoxide and oxygen, can you see the monoxide's going to grab it first? Because it forms a very tight union. And that explains why if you go to a hospital ward where limbs are being amputated, it's usually smokers. Because by the time the blood gets to the extremities, there's no oxygen left. And if remember, it's the most vital element needed for life. When those extremities are lacking oxygen, basically they start to die.